Hey, everybody! Welcome to Tavern Talk. Hey, I'm getting these right. I'm getting better at introducing what the correct show when we're actually going on.
Well, we're
Remember,
still in the beginning phases of this.
that's true.
So, but yeah, welcome to Tavern Talk. This is the show where we sit around and talk about D&D, and damn, is there a lot to talk about right now.
Holy smokes.
We talk about our own show, Tavern Knights, and and then we talk about other D&D stuff, and it looks like Renee's got to step away for a second, probably to take care of one of the dogs. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about our show. We'll talk about that. We're also going to get into D&D and all the hoopla that's been going on with them for the last little over a week now, or right about a week now. And the OGL, and with Paizo coming out with their orc. The time of the OGL is gone. It's now to the time of the orc. But yeah, we'll talk about all of that stuff, and we'll see where it goes. So, just to give you an intro, I'm Chris. I'm the dungeon master for Tavern Knights. Below me is Russ, my partner on Nerds with Alcohol. If you're not watching, join us tomorrow at 8:00 for that. And then over to the side of me over here, or over there, is Bob. He plays Grimbolt, Axehand, in a Dwarven Ranger in our D&D campaign. Next to Russ and below Bob. What's that?
Dwarven Ranger, other stuff.
Well, a little bit now, but he's mostly a Dwarven Ranger.
He's just so secretive.
And then the one that had to go take care of the dog, that's Renee. She plays Klimbrum, a Dwarven monk. And then down at the bottom is Pete, who plays Euchariah, a halfling wizard. Interesting characters all. Oh, and Russ plays a Asimar.
Asimar Paladin.
Yeah, I like saying Asimar. Then
we've been trained by Supernatural that angels are asses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's start real quick, just talking about the show. We were back from our holiday break, and I had a blast. It was great being back at the table, but I honestly had a blast that whole thing. I think it was a fantastic episode and session of gaming. Yep. So you guys,
it was a great game.
Yeah, there's it was mostly a dungeon crawl type of thing where you guys left the Dwarven Ranch of Grimbolt's family and went and found your way and found kind of a secret passage into the mountains, that it led through a tunnel that then opened back up into a chasm, and it seemed like the sun never hit it, and then you found the outline of a door and had to figure out how to open the door. And luckily, Euchariah remembered it, that he had gotten a message from his adoptive mother in a dream.
In a dream, yeah.
That said, "In darkness, you'll find your way. You'll find your path." And you guys had tried casting light on the door and daylight and all that, and the next day you remembered that, and Klimbrum cast darkness when everyone was still discussing it, and they're like, "Well, wait, no," and she's like, "Nope, too late, I did it." Yeah. And you found out that the passage actually opened.
Yeah.
So you entered it, and now you're in a cavern system where you're fighting really pale, dark-haired elves, shadow dogs, and there's a dim light everywhere in it.
All of our light is heavily muted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As well.
Yes, all your light appears to be very muted, and it gives off nothing more than dim light.
Totally fine with it. I love this place.
Yeah, I was like, which Klimbrum has no problems with.
Klimbrum's new home.
This is like paradise.
She's like, I got an entrance. That was the other thing. When you looked outside, when you got in, you could see outside, and it was dark. It was like
when
nighttime
we knew when it was definitely morning
when you
we
went in. Yep. So, but you didn't go back outside or try going back outside to take a look around.
No.
So you adventured through. You ran into a couple of those elves with a couple of shadow dogs, and then you beat them, and you went farther in. You found what looked like a torture chamber, and fought some more of those elves, and beat them, and that's where we stopped. So that's
those
where
elves were a bit on the nasty side. Like they had like standard weapon attacks, but then every single time that there was an attack, they had an additional what was a necrotic type damage that was just
that's what you
really
saw.
nasty.
Yeah, you had to make a save, and if you missed your save, then you don't yeah necrotic damage. We'll just say that's what happens every time.
Oh, I thought that we said that
I do
it was
believe
like a
one of them
necrotic.
did 97 points in a single turn
Mhm.
to a single player.
Yeah,
Because it
to
was
a single dwarven monk.
Which player was that?
because wasn't it a critical hit with like almost maximum hit
Yeah.
dice?
Yeah, it was a critical hit, and I rolled really well.
Yeah, that was something, man. You don't often see almost 100 points of damage done to anybody in one round.
Yeah, in the old systems, that would have been critical damage, and you would have had to make a death save.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Anything
I think
over
it is,
50
and it's
points, anything over 50 points in a round.
I thought it was
From a
anything over
single
half
attack.
your
50 points in one hit.
Yeah,
in one
from
hit.
from one single
Yeah.
attack, you had to make a death save.
I thought
And-
it was
Oh, really?
half
Even
your, I thought it was half your ace, or half your hit
It
points.
depends. There were two different rules. There was one at one point where it was half your hit points, and there was another one later. I think it was in 3.5. They
Yeah.
changed it to 50.
Yeah, it was
And-
50 in one hit, or the original one was half your hit points in a round.
Yeah,
So it didn't have to
I
be
mean,
in
that
the
makes
original one.
sense.
It didn't have to be all one source, or
Right.
all one hit.
yeah. So yeah, but then if you miss your death save, you're dead. Boom. That's it.
One death save.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, it was the massive damage,
Yeah.
just causing instant death.
Yeah.
Oh.
You're
Okay,
basically
I
your body
gotcha.
goes into shock and you die.
I mean, in all reality, that makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense.
it does. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Yep,
yeah, like
but-
the what is it? The
Shock to the
NFL player,
system.
the NFL
Yeah.
player who just
Yeah.
got hit on the chest. That can happen to anybody. You take
Yep.
a hard enough hit to your chest, and your heart can stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep,
and
for sure.
they're saying that they think his was he hit it at just the right point in his rhythm, in his heart rhythm.
Yeah.
That caused the electrical disruption and
Yeah.
caused his heart to stop.
By the way, thankfully, apparently he's doing much better. I think
Yep.
he's heading home. Going
He's
home.
actually already at home.
He's home.
He was home this weekend. He actually had texted out that he was going to be watching his boys play their game on Sunday from home, recovering, and that he was just going to focus on recovering. Because a lot of people were like, is he going to come to the stadium? And they were really hoping he'd actually get out. He's like, nope. You know what? I'm staying home and taking care of myself.
Yeah.
Good.
So,
I love that the first thing he texted when he came to, when they finally
Did
took
we
him out of
win?
medically induced coma,
yeah.
was, did we win the game? And the doctor came back with, you won the game of life. And I'm like, come on, really?
So
That's yeah.
But anyway, that's
Yeah,
where we
I mean,
left
he
off.
really did.
Yeah, that's where we
Really
left off,
excited
and
where
that's
we
where we're
come
going to come
next.
back next time. I had a blast with this. It was also our first chance for me to use the new camera setup that I was thinking about, and we started doing, instead of doing a full map and me drawing everything out, even though I did draw out this whole dungeon. Instead of me drawing it all out and you guys just marching your figs along and just doing that overhead map.
Very
was
old
always-
school, by the way. That
Yeah.
was very
Yeah.
that was a very old school way of doing it.
Yep. Which I still love doing it that way, but we went more with the more modern Critical Role and other types of things where it's more theater of the mind until you get to something important like a fight or a room that you really need to investigate or something like that. And then
Yeah.
I was able to go grab my new Dwarven Forge stuff and bring it out and put it on the table and have a camera actually angled at it at table level.
Mm-hmm.
Which, while you still can't see everything because the walls do block the close end, it's still, I think, better than the overhead that just looked like a bunch of circles and you couldn't tell what was what
Yep.
because it was too far away. Because let's face it, we don't have the CR budget
No.
for having professional cameras and a crew to run them.
Nobody but CR.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, my guess for CR, it's mostly like automated because I mean they probably have their cameras are set up and they probably have an engineer that like can edit set it up or whatever. Because for the most part, it's not like the cameras move. They're
No.
static
Yeah.
cameras. It's not like a sitcom where you got the cameras moving around from face to face and things like that. So, but still, that's still 4 to 5 hours, somewhere between 3.5 to 5 hours of paying somebody to do that. So that can't be cheap.
Yeah, and they've got a bigger table that's actually created to handle the cameras and things like that, which someday, eventually, when I have a house with a big enough basement, that may be the way that we do it, because I'm hoping to actually create a table that will be able to do that.
Very cool.
But anyway, so that's where we left off. That's where we're going to pick up.
But Chris, I really think that with that new setup and the way that you're talking about the theater of the mind, we were talking about this before the last game, though, and even after, I felt like our dungeon crawl was a lot more streamlined. It also took out that aspect of metagaming without trying to metagame, where we're thinking like, oh, did we actually check every single nook and cranny, and we actually like just draw it out until we're like, this room is 100% done. We've looked everywhere. We think that there was something over here. There wasn't anything. Maybe we rolled bad, but there's papers that are covering it. So we're not trying to do it, but at the same time, there's that aspect of it. By removing that and that theater of the mind, it made it a lot more streamlined overall. And I felt like we were able to. It was an enjoyable experience. I thought that it was very successful.
I agree. I agree. I think it was. I mean, there's a reason why the big, RPG shows are doing it this way, because it does definitely cut down on what you were talking about, Chris, like the potential for even if it's not conscious metagaming, it's still subconscious metagaming.
Yep.
And then as well the kind of the tedium of like, okay, now we go this way, do we have to go down this hallway? We got to go down the other hallway and stuff. So we could just kind of skip over that stuff and just kind of get to the meat of the sandwich,
right.
So to speak.
Well, and it's going to mean that I may have to describe rooms multiple times to you guys, because like this time, if you go back, because I know there was a door in the previous room that you didn't go through because you went through one door and there was another door. So as if you go back there, then I have to I would have to describe that room again and say this is where you came in and things. But that's fine. It's still going to take less time than an actual like previous dungeon crawl with, I'm going to search every one of these walls because I see paper all the way around this. I want to see if there's a secret door.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So that being said, it really was a great game, and it's just a continuing on the excellent gaming experience that this campaign has been.
Yeah, and I'm excited too, because this is something that is completely mine from scratch. So.
Yeah, that has been great too. It's great. It's great to see that. I honestly prefer playing in campaigns that are homebrew. That are created by the creator as opposed to by the GM, as opposed to just playing in a module. I mean, modules are fun. They can be fun, and particularly if they're run by a really good GM. But I really prefer to play, something like what Matt Mercer's created with Critical Role, or what you've created, or what past DMs when I played with Sean Nicolin's game or in Ed Rohn's game. Even if it's set in an established D&D setting, like the Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or Greyhawk or whatever, I still prefer a game that's created whole cloth by the people that I'm playing with. Much better.
Well, when you think about it, like this is before Bob's time, but one of our memorable moments that we actually go back to was that Orcus fight, or like that wizard or priest of Orcus, which was back in Stonetooth, I think.
Yep.
very early on. That was not part of the module that you were running. That was
Correct.
just that was something that you actually added in and you wrote specifically to add in flavor into the game, or maybe it's an overall arcing story. But that was a big point of our campaign, and is one of the most impactful fights and battles that we ever had. So I'm very excited with the way that you're where this goes next, because that was something that you created completely, that you weren't running from a module, and that's what you're saying that we're moving forward with in this adventure part right now.
Yeah, it is true that this game did start off kind of with a bit of a module, right, Chris? Or like the beginning of it.
Well, and I did that.
You branched off from there.
Yeah, well, I did that because, in all honesty, the campaign that I'm running, or the story that I'm running, is actually something for higher level characters. It's for like probably 10th to 15th level characters is my plan.
Right.
So you guys are in it now. And what that other story did, though, is it gave me a base for you guys to work out of.
A starting point.
Phandalin. It gave me other NPCs I could bring in, like Gundren and Sildar and those folks. I am greatly expanding on that now, and you guys will see that in upcoming sessions as time goes by. Phandalin is continuing to grow, so there's that. It let me bring in Raslim to play mentor or patron for you guys, and do things like that, and create like Noblin's gizmos, and start bringing artificers into the game, things like that. So it's one of those things where yes, I use the modules, but I'm using them to further my own story and to set my story up.
And that's what a lot of modules are supposed to be. They're supposed to be a jumping on point or starting point, or a reference point.
And from what I read online before that, like the Lost Mines of Phandelver is a very beginner-friendly module for new players. And we had 3 brand new players that never played one game of D&D before. Well, I think Renee played a little bit before then, but Rich and I never played any at all. I felt like it was a great introduction for us, and where it wasn't making it overly complicated for you as the DM either, but I was able to understand like the concept, the rules, and the role playing, everything that gets integrated into it. I felt like it was a very good introduction for all of us.
Yeah, and I'm glad. That was one of the reasons why I was using that. But also, Stonetooth, that's the Forge of Fury, which is another module. And I basically used it to use the maps because I was being a lazy GM, and I wanted someone else to draw the maps for me, and I didn't want to have to draw it out. So that's what I use that's really what I use that for. But then I used some of it to like the orcs and stuff like that. I'm like, the orcs were still upstairs, but then I put that Temple of Orcus in there, and I made that whole lower level all undead instead of what was actually in the module.
Oh, okay.
It's supposed to be like Durgar, the dark dwarves and troglodytes and things like that. And a lot of those were still there, but they were undead. Like, you met the troglodytes, but they were all undead at that point. They'd all been killed and transformed. And the Durgar had mostly moved out, but you found remnants of them. Things like that. So
it's not lazy DMing, that's smart DMing. That's using tools.
And I think that was more in line with the campaign and like the overall story and what we that you wanted to tell and where we're actually going, rather than something more like random that we come across.
And that dragon was the same. I made it a little bit more powerful, but it was the same. Just because,
love it when we fight a dragon.
Just because if you guys had fought an actual regular young dragon, it would have gone down. Well, hell, it still went down in 4 rounds.
We were level 6, man. I mean, level 6 going up against a dragon. I mean, in my opinion, fucking that's recommend, or that's a not a recommendation. That's a formula for a total party kill, man. It's just
Well, and if Rich hadn't gone water walk. Now,
Yeah.
in 3.5, because I just played my 3.5 campaign over the weekend, and my character in that is a cleric, and we're on a ship, and I was looking at, and we got attacked, and I looked up water walk because I had it memorized, and that is a touch spell in 3.5. It is up to one person per level that you touch. It's not just an area effect.
Yeah, like now it's I think a 30-foot radius.
Yeah, 30-foot radius.
Yeah.
And
That's
up to
big.
six
That's a big-
creatures,
that-
and up to like 5 or 6 creatures, or 6 creatures, I think it is, that you decide.
That's a big difference from a touch
Big
spell.
difference.
Yeah.
Gosh.
big difference.
Huge.
Huge.
So, but yeah, so I'm
I'd
really
say
excited.
about 30 feet difference.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so
Sorry.
the other thing is that even in 5, even if it was that, you could still move and run around and touch people through your movement, because you could cast then move, or move, cast, and then finish your move to get more people. In 3.5, you can't do that. Once you stop moving, you're done. You cannot continue moving unless you have the mobility feat.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, because that's like for us, if you have 30 feet of movement, you can move 5 feet and then attack or cast
and
spells
then-
or whatever, and
and then
then
move.
continue, and then hide or go the other 25 feet or anything else that you may need.
Well, you can't hide unless you're a rogue, and you can do that.
Oh,
as a
that's
bonus
right,
action,
the bonus
because
action,
hide
gotcha.
is actually a full round action.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, you're right. You can break your movement up in 5. You can't in 3.5. It's like your chess piece. As soon as you take your hand off your chess piece, you're done.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, because I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I can get like everybody up here on the deck. Oh wait, this isn't 5. I can't run around and touch people. So, it's but yeah, it's I that's one of the things I actually enjoy more about 5th is it lets you do things like that. It's a continuous action instead of, oh, I run up here, all right, now I stop, now I cast my spell or I attack, and I'm done. It's more fluid in 5. It's I run in, I swipe with my sword, or I cast my spell and I continue moving this way, type of thing. So you're actually kind of doing it on the run. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking forward to Friday, because this Friday, 7:30 p.m. Tavern Knights.
Oh, can't wait.
Same Twitch channel, different Twitch time.
There will
So-
be more bamfing.
So speaking of that, so we've been talking about how the game is flexible and is mutable and is an ongoing kind of and I've always said that Dungeons and Dragons particularly is kind of a living, breathing creature to some extent. Like it's constantly, they're updating it and changing things, and like we've seen
Evolving.
a lot of evolving. We've seen like the evolution of the language about how they don't use the term race anymore.
It's species.
They use species now, and okay, fine. And different things like that. Now, as many of us saw over the week and over the last like 10 days or so.
Look at Russ making a segue here.
Yeah, that's pro
doing this
stuff
for a little
there.
while.
That's
Been
pro
doing this for a little
stuff.
while now. Been at this about 6 years, so
Yeah. You usually let me make the segues. I could just sit
well.
back and let this one go.
Oh, go ahead, Russ.
Well, we've seen massive change and massive controversy. More controversy now, I'd say, in the last like I said, week to 10 days than we've seen since 4.0 happened.
I think this
And
was even more than 4.0.
I think it's even
It was
more,
definitely
yeah.
more concentrated.
Right. Because 4.0, at least people didn't realize how much of a dumpster fire that was until it came out, until people played it.
And the thing is that with 4.0, people just went, okay, I'm just going back to 3.5.
3.5, right. But because 4.0 happened, we got something called we got something called Pathfinder. Pathfinder by Paizo was a direct result of the disgruntledness, the disappointment of 4.0. And personally, I loved Pathfinder version 1. I don't know a whole lot about version 2 yet. I do own several of the books. I haven't really had the chance to go through them just yet. But Pathfinder, part 1 was version 1 was essentially D&D 3.75. It was pretty much exactly that game, 3.5, just with some improvements and some and additional stuff. And I played it for a long time. D&D 5.0 arguably is the ultimate version of the game and is probably the most successful version of the game. And of course, we've seen D&D over the last 20 years become, if not 10 years, become more popular now than it's ever been. And in the last 10 days, we saw Wizards of the Coast not shoot themselves in the foot, shot themselves in the face.
Yeah.
For those of you guys who aren't following the news, and I'm sure you probably are, the OGL, which is the Open Gaming License, they decided to make.
It was released in 2000.
Right, it was released in 2000. They made a bunch of. They've decided after 20 years of this, over 20 years of this being extremely successful, extremely profitable, and good for the hobby itself and for the games and for creators and everything else.
And this is still when Wizards owned it.
Yeah,
WotC still owned the game. Did own the game at this time.
And they opened up the license, basically allowing third party creators, allowed them to create supplemental products for Dungeons and Dragons, and not necessarily have to be published under the Wizards of the Coast banner, but it would still be available. So
with some exceptions, they had specific rules that they had.
Was that an example of what you just did with the Tasha's Kiss? Was that like one of those type of?
Yes, that module
is like an example, right?
That is a perfect example because that's exactly what that was. That was content or community content that was created by someone from the community and put out on. I actually got it from DM's Guild. Actually, is where I got it.
But that is what we're talking about.
Yes.
Is that type of content overall.
That or like Critical Roles books being put out. Pathfinder, because it let people use the D20 system.
Correct.
It let them use the same game system as D&D, which since then, or I don't know exactly when it was, but the Supreme Court has actually ruled that a game system itself cannot be copyrighted.
Right, but the OGL also allowed the use of, elves and dwarves and basically all of the basic.
Except for a few creatures, it lets you use everything.
Yeah, so the base, types of like things in the game that makes it recognizable as D&D.
Yeah. You can't use mind flayers. That's actually one that they have copyrighted. So if you see them in another game, they're like called brain eaters or something like that because they just can't call them mind flayers or illithids.
Now the advantage of those two is just like people could put out like people like Kobold Press who would put out their various monster manual type things, or a book that was all about spells, or a book that's all like 700 new spells that you can integrate into your game, or new creatures, or new weapons and armor and magic items and stuff like that. These were all books that these third party companies could put out that you could use in your game, but it still required you to have a player's handbook, a dungeon master's guide, a monster manual, and some of the other things that you would need to play the game. So ultimately, it just ended up, spiking the sales of a lot of the core books of D&D. So it was really very, very helpful for the game system. It allowed people to create products for a game that they loved and D&D ultimately profited from it. It helped overall. It just sounded like that dog farted. That's exactly what it sounded like to me. I know you're probably shaking in your chair.
He was just sniffing stuff and moving around.
Man. So anyway, it was now the Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have decided that after a couple weeks ago, it being announced that the people in the upper management felt that Dungeons and Dragons was under monetized, decided to change the OGL, and then it was leaked on the website IO9 their initial plans for the OGL 1.1, and of course, the internet exploded, and the game community exploded. Because I'm not going to go through it right now, but the details of it were very detrimental to the game. What was one of the bigger things was having to pay out to Wizards of the Coast if said company made what was it, profit of $750,000?
Not profit. 750. If you made 700, if you received $750,000, which seems like a lot of money, but I mean, if you're talking about selling something for $10 a piece, and you sell 75,000 of them with the size of the community that's out there, I mean that's really not that big of a deal. But anyway,
it also included all the Kickstarter stuff too.
Yeah, it also included Kickstarter. They weren't specifying anything. It was if you make $750,000, not profit. That's gross.
Anything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Then
actually, I read an article.
Anything beyond that, they wanted 25% of.
Yeah, I read an article that said for Kickstarters it was 20%.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they actually made a caveat that said for Kickstarted projects it was 20%, but yeah, 25%.
Yeah.
Now
of beyond what it was. Now that's the thing. They weren't taking anything of the $750,000.
Right.
But it was anything beyond that they wanted 25%. But the thing is that a lot of people, if they make $1 million, if they sell their product and get $1 million, then 900,000 of that went into is just gone. That's their
company costs, printing costs, all that other stuff.
Yeah,
salaries,
salaries, paying like Cobalt Press, because Cobalt Press is going to take their part too.
Right. Exactly. Now, see, I also read too that the publishing industry is a very tight. The profit margin is extremely tight.
Very slim.
Very thin. So doing something like that would essentially it wouldn't be cost effective. It would take out too much of the profit that it wouldn't be profitable anymore. It wouldn't be it just wouldn't be a viable system. Now, actually, I have an article here on Games Radar that actually deals with this. The Dark Souls RPG dev on D&D licensing controversy. It says that the revolt has already begun. Now, one of the things that I was bothered by about this. Now when this happened, some of the more famous D&D players and proponents and whatnot, like Ginny D, have basically called out and said when the news came out, when all of the details about 1.1 came out, they're saying, guys, we can't allow this to happen, and we're calling for people to cancel their D&D Beyond subscriptions, because that would be the closest to, it would hit them hardest, the most immediate.
Yep. That started the hashtag D&D Be Gone campaign.
Right.
On Twitter.
And it was extremely successful because thousands of people canceled their D&D.
They said tens of thousands. They said the numbers were in the 5 digits.
Wow. Tens of thousands of people canceled their D&D Beyond
subscription within days.
Subscriptions within a day, within a couple of days. And that was enough. That was enough for Hasbro to go, oh, what the fuck have we done?
Yeah, don't piss off nerds.
So here's the thing. My thing with this is that they made this thing got leaked. They didn't make an immediate statement. That's fine. 24 hours went by, they still hadn't made a statement. 48 hours went by, they still didn't make a statement. 72 hours went by, they still didn't make a statement. Right. By that point, you're just ignoring it and hoping it goes away.
Exactly.
And all you're doing is letting people stew and get more and more angry about what's going on, and you're not coming out and saying anything. It took the D&D Begone campaign and all of that happening over a couple of days for them to go, oh fuck, we should probably say something. And they finally put something out last Friday after like 6 or 7 days after it actually came out.
Right.
As
Now,
the thing
see,
got leaked.
my stance was I was at a wait and see kind of thing, because I was like, you know what, this 1.1 was leaked. Now, I'm sure it was leaked on purpose. My guess is somebody at WotC basically went, oh god, this is a goddamn mistake. We got to let the players know so that they can get ahead of this, so we can show Hasbro that this is a bad idea.
Supposedly, it was actually sent out to certain content creators for their review, and it's supposed to be one of them that leaked it, is what they're saying.
So that was what they said in the statement, more or less. I call bullshit. But my opinion was, once it got leaked and I read it and I said, well, I'm not gonna cancel my subscription yet. I'm gonna wait. I'm going to wait and see what the company says first, but then because they had taken a week,
and that's the thing. That was my thing. I was fine with wait and see. That was me at the beginning too. I'm like, wait and see. After 3 days, I'm like, I'm done waiting. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily going to cancel right away because we use it for our game, and I'm still planning on using D&D for the game, because this is all supposed to be like once one D&D comes out. This is like a year from now.
Right.
But I understood, and I'm like, no, I'm done waiting. They should have said something by now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that them waiting so long was a huge mistake.
Insiders at WotC have said that once D&D Begone happened, once they lost 25,000 subscribers or whatever, they scrambled to try and figure out damage control, and their statement that was released on Friday was very
sus.
Very sus. It was very political. It was very much like, oh shit, we got to try and save face. They even went so far as to include D&D terminology to try and put a little laugh on it. Guys, we obviously rolled a 1.
Which, you know what? That's the one thing in there that I think is redeeming. Because the rest of it, I see what they're saying, and I'm willing to take them at their word. And I know Ed has said that he takes people at their word, not corporations. And I can get behind that, because I don't trust corporations.
Yes, but corporations are made up of people, and I am going to try, and I'm still willing to give Wizards of the Coast the opportunity to course correct, but it is going to take a lot to regain the trust that they've lost. So from me and from the gaming community on the whole.
Reading the article, the statement, and we're not going to go through the whole thing, but it's out there if you want to read it. We can put a link to it on Facebook. But the thing with the statement is that, well, I don't agree with Ed that it matches the narcissist prayer so well. It does read very much like an abuser's apology.
Yeah.
And the more I read it, the more I see that. When I especially if I read it without the rose-colored glasses of someone who loves D&D and has grown up loving D&D. I read it as, oh yeah, I fucked up. I won't ever do that again. I'm sorry. Here, let me give you something. That's the way I read that.
But didn't they had that announcement? Maybe I'm having my time frame off, but I thought that Paizo with Pathfinder came out with a statement ahead of
the day before.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the things that prompted Wizards of the Coast to actually put an official statement out, because of what Paizo did, right?
Actually, the biggest thing that caused them to do it was their loss of money. They were hemorrhaging. They lost a limb, and they were hemorrhaging. The fact that it was
within 24 hours after their competitor.
Paizo came out with the Way of the Orc.
Yeah.
Paizo is still their largest competitor in the fantasy RPG,
and yet they actually use the OGL.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they helped write it.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's the thing. The people who started Paizo used to work for WotC,
Right.
and they were there, and they're the one. Several of them are the ones that actually helped craft the OGL.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I read the Paizo statement, and I posted this on Discord.
The Paizo statement is great.
Yeah, but it kind of reminded me, if you guys and I posted on Discord that like back in like 2014, there's like a during E3, there's like a big thing between Xbox One and like PlayStation 4, and Xbox One did their like thing first, and they said like, oh, we're not going to have backward compatible games where you have to be online every single like at all times, otherwise it so that way you can update. You have to authenticate within 24 hours, otherwise it bricks your system.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very next day, PlayStation 4 comes out, basically says, nope, you don't have to have it connected to the internet. Yes, you can use games, and like saying the exact opposite. And
it still didn't have backwards compatibility, but yeah, you're right. It was
or
still...
or use games though. It could use games, but they basically won E3 back then by saying the exact opposite of what Xbox and Microsoft did. And then it made Microsoft walk back on it all. It seems like it's a very similar situation between like the Pathfinder and D&D right now.
It's still one of the reasons why PlayStation outsells Xbox for the most part.
Yeah.
Is because of that right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, an article I was reading basically was stating that we've just witnessed the end of the golden age of Dungeons and Dragons. That now even even stated that the creator of the writer of the article has said, and the guy he was interviewing was basically the guy, what's his name, the Dark Souls RPG, the dev, Richard, I think Richard August is his name. He did say, he goes, Dungeons and Dragons is going to recover from this. It's still going to be the most popular fantasy RPG, but we are going to see a rise in other gaming systems. It's going to be more like it was in, I'd say, the mid 80s when we did start to see the rise of other smaller game systems
Powers
like
and
Palladium
Perils and
Palladium, Champions, FASA.
Right. All these other systems that came on board. I mean, a lot of those games still exist, and there are still other RPGs out there, Shadowrun and Vampire and all these other systems, but they don't use the same system. They don't use the D20 system.
Right.
I think we're going to see a rise of a bunch of other games, other games that uses similar systems that still maybe use a type of D20 system, but they're going to be, tweaked. They're going to be different. So that way people don't have to necessarily go out and try and relearn a whole nother, rule system.
Right.
But I for one, as much as I love D&D and I'm not willing to abandon it completely, I'd be down to play Pathfinder.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
It just depends.
So the other thing with Pathfinder is they basically came out with their statement saying, we're going to create this new system that we're also not going to own. We're going to let a third-party law firm own this system so that we can never change it. Which, that's the other thing, is they're basically just coming out and saying, hey, we don't want this. We want this to be an open community. We want this to continue to go. You want it? Here, we'll give it to you. And we're not going to own it. We don't ever want this to change.
And they're paying to make that happen.
Yep.
Like, they're taking all the risk and all the funding for it to make the players be able to play the game the way that they want to play it.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, if you want to buy our stuff right now, here's a code to get 25% off.
Right. Yeah, 25% off the starter box. Okay, so this is
any core book.
Here's an excerpt from this thing that it was like I said, the guy August Says Richard August, lead RPG writer at Steam Forged Games, perhaps best known for his tabletop adaptations of Dark Souls and Elden Ring. He said this was badly conceived at its very base level, but he states here, he goes, it's the trust waterfall. He goes, I think the revolt has already begun, he notes. Once the trust is gone, it's gone forever. D&D is not going to have the same feedback loop of high-quality third-party productions to encourage people to go back to those core books to remain involved. Like I said, the Player's Guide, the DM's Guide. That's not to say D&D won't carry on being the biggest game. Wizards will probably walk this back and attempt to recapture some of the goodwill they've lost. But I think its status as the #1 game will be much more tenuous than it has been as a result of this. The smaller companies are not going to want to get into bed with Wizards. I think we'll probably see more companies producing material for D&D rival Pathfinder, and I think we will see a huge spate of similar-ish systems. And that's just what I was saying. We're going to see a bunch of people entering the marketplace trying to grab that piece that D&D basically fucked up by, you know. And it's amazing to me. Like I said, they screwed up so badly in this. And one of the things that boggles my mind too is the fact that it's almost like gamers were ready to rebel. We're ready for something like this to happen because, like, I mean, for the most part, the majority of people that I have talked to about this have been like, well, fuck them. And it hasn't been the more moderate, well, wait a minute, let's wait and see what the company has to say first. This was a leaked thing, or let's see if how they respond to the fan base or whatever else. I mean, most people were ready to jump ship right away.
I was pretty close. I was pissed.
I think a lot of people
after 3 days, I'm like, no, you know what? Don't fuck with my D&D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like I said, again, I'm willing to give them a little more time, give us more time to kind of figure out how they can potentially fix this. For all we know, they could walk it back, 90%, make a couple of adjustments that just to make them a little happy, make Hasbro a little happier.
Yeah.
And then, kiss our ass to basically come back.
Well, so one of the things that they have come out and said in their statement was that they're walking this whole thing back. They're pulling it back because it obviously needs more work. And some of the things that they will definitely be putting into the future is the next one that they come out with, they said will have no royalty structure whatsoever in it.
Right.
And the other thing that people were pissed about was in the OGL 1.1, what they came out and said was, if you create something and put it out there, we can take it. Right. And we can modify it, and we don't owe you shit.
Right. That was something that freaked people out a great deal. Mm-hmm. There was also the problem with deauthorization, because what it was going to do was going to make the 1.0 completely null and void. Anything that was made under what's that?
1.0A was actually
1.0A. Yeah. That it would be completely null and void. So anything that was made before, with that would have to be pulled off shelves or would have to be pulled off of, offline and stuff like that. And so people are like, what the fuck, man? We've got 2 books that are coming out in 3 months, and they're already at the printer, and they're already, and you're going to do it. So they're also saying like, no, we're going to pull all that away too. That's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, but they also pulled that whole licensing thing, the reverse licensing that they were talking about, where they own what you put out, they can pull it and own it. They said no, whatever you make, you will own. So I mean, they're walking some of the stuff back, but we'll see what happens. I've also seen reports that insiders are saying that in management meetings, there's a lot of people are overreacting. The players and fans they're overreacting. Give them a couple of months, and this will all blow over. They'll completely forget about it.
They'll forget about it. Nuh-uh.
And I'm like,
nerds have a long memory.
Yeah, and I'm like, fuck you. And the other thing, so Renee and I were talking about this, and I think I mentioned it at Gaming on Saturday, Bob, was they put this out and acted like, oh, we're putting this out. Oh, and people won't notice. They won't pay attention to this. This isn't, nobody's going to pay attention. I'm like, Nerds are smart, and it's almost like they were surprised that people got pissed about this and actually read it and understood it.
We read 400-page rule books cover to cover.
Right, exactly.
It's like
For
they were
fun.
surprised that you read the terms, terms and conditions.
Yeah, the EULA.
Yeah.
I think, and once again, this comes down to money people. This comes down to like business people that don't know art.
Yeah.
That don't know gaming, that don't know their audience. Now, the WotC people probably, the game designers and the people that actually play the game probably I would imagine that the people, the WotC people sitting at the table with the Hasbro people, and Hasbro's like, okay, yeah, these are the changes we think that our legal department has made, and we're gonna just put them out, or put it on a fucking whiteboard, and the WotC people just going, you want to do what? And then them saying something like, they're not even gonna notice. Wait a minute. You don't know our people. You don't know our audience. You don't know the people that are buying our products. They'll know. Well, pissed, And
here's the thing: most of the nerds I know are also more on a liberal bent, so they're not going to fall in line with corporate greed like a lot of the more conservative people do.
Right.
They don't fall in line with that. It's that, wait, you want to do what? You want to screw over the little guy? No, fuck you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Because they
most of the people that play this game are small business owners and the little guy.
Yeah.
They even said in their statement, that in their recovery statement, that this wasn't targeted. It wasn't supposed to target the small creator.
Yeah.
It was supposed to target.
Sure as hell seemed like it.
But that's the thing. There are nobody making content here are making tens of millions of dollars.
Paizo might be.
Paizo maybe.
Really,
Paizo
that's what they could have come out and said. This wasn't targeted at the little guys. This was targeted at Paizo.
Paizo, yeah. Or potentially even, targeted at somebody like Critical Role. I think they probably look at Critical Role and go, that's where we should be. How come we're not making that kind of?
And they're saying they did come out and say that none of this had any. This was only for tabletop role playing game stuff. This is nothing for live streams, nothing for anything like that. But Critical Role has created their own publishing company to publish their content, which would fall under the OGL and would actually fall into line and with the millions of critters around the world buying those books at $50 a pop.
Interestingly enough, yeah, and they did extremely well. Like, you can't find the first book that they put out anymore. It's out of print.
Yeah, I'm glad I got it.
You can't. Me too. And the new one you can still get because it's relative. It came out in 22.
Yeah. Which I actually haven't.
Gorgeous.
No, wait. I've got the D&D one because they did put one out with D&D.
Right.
And then I haven't got
two out for D&D.
Yeah. Oh, there was only one.
No, they put out a source book. They put the Wildmount, and then there's a adventure.
Oh.
Adventure book.
Okay, I've got the Wildmount book, and then but this latest one I don't think I have bought, the Exandria one, because it's more of the expanded campaign for Exandria. It basically makes the first book null and void is really what it is. It's
the new Tal'Dorei book is gorgeous. It's got a bunch of, it's about like double the size, it's double the thickness, and it's the art is improved. There's just a lot more material in it. I highly recommend it. It's gorgeous. But yeah, it is. Critical Role worked with D&D and Exandria is now an official Dungeons and Dragons world, and which has made Matt Mercer through the roof. It put him through the roof. It's great. But then they still continue to put out their own content, and I would be surprised. And that was the interesting thing too. Everybody was looking to Critical Role for some kind of response to this, and they wisely didn't say anything.
They did put something out yesterday or the day before.
Right.
Yeah. It was after Wizards put something out.
Right. And it was about how that they have always continued to support individual creators and the content and the storyline. It was very, again, relatively political response, but it was it was a cool statement. It was decent enough. And then there was also statements, tweets that although Matt didn't make any tweets, Matt shared tweets from other people
Hmm.
on his Twitter about creator content and about people being disgruntled and stuff like that. So he couldn't do everything he wanted to do due to probably, you know, licensing agreements and whatnot, but and sponsorship, because D&D Beyond is a major sponsor of Critical Role.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think that was a prepaid thing, and now that WotC owns it, I have a feeling that's going to change.
Probably. You know,
Because that's the whole thing. WotC is their plan is to make this whole thing multimedia. That's Hasbro and them's thing. They've got the movie coming out. They've got a TV show that's in pre-production now. They are developing their own virtual tabletop, and I think once that comes out, then we're going to see another uproar as they pull everything from every other virtual tabletop out there and say, nope, we're not giving anything to. We're not going to sell. Let you sell anything on Roll20 or Foundry or Fantasy Grounds or any of those. We're not putting out content for them anymore. If you want to play on a virtual tabletop and you want to play D&D, you have to play on ours.
yeah.
And
Well, we'll see.
And
I mean, they did
that's where
say
we're gonna see a bunch of different microtransactions on there. Oh, you got your little figure. You want to change your armor? Okay, that's $1 to change your armor,
gosh.
and it's gonna be a shit ton of little microtransactions.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, they did state Dungeons & Dragons is under monetized, and the thing is ultimately, I agree with that. I think that like D&D largely has been under monetized for a long time. I've been wanting D&D based movies and television shows and more video games for years. Video games is one of the few places they have, delved into, and then we found out that they canceled like 5 ones that were in development this year. They're supposed to,
after like building 6 studios around the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is still slated to be fully released in August, I believe August of this year. Thank the gods. I did find another article here that they're still saying, they're saying really positive things about it, and that normally a game of that magnitude that's been in beta essentially for almost 3 years. It says early access doesn't usually work the way Larian does it. By the time Baldur's Gate 3's full launch arrives in August, will be in early access for just under 3 years. For a lot of games, that'd be a death sentence. But the opposite has been true. People are chomping at the bit to get to this.
Yeah, and I mean,
to get this game.
I'm looking forward to the movie.
Oh yeah, me too. Now, see, that's the other thing too. People were calling for
boycotts of the movie.
For boycotts of the movie. Now, me personally, I would say normally that would be a good idea, but the thing is it's when it comes to making fantasy movies and to Dungeons and Dragons specifically, the
very poorly.
Yeah, the track record's really bad. So if this movie fails, it's going to be a long time before anybody takes a chance on trying to make a D&D, a big budget D&D movie again. And it could potentially affect whether further shows and cartoons are made. So,
well, it took 20 years.
Right.
I remember when I first started working at the movie theater at AMC. It was like early 2000, like 2001. That's where the first D&D movie came out, and I didn't know anything about it. Fucking
awful.
And I mean, Reign of Fire was also very technically a D&D movie too. Yeah. From what I understand.
No, Reign of Fire wasn't. Reign of Fire was a futuristic movie. It was actually future Earth.
It was a post-apocalyptic kind of thing. That's where the dragons get woken up, right?
Yeah.
It was Matthew McConaughey, I think, right?
Yeah, Matt McConaughey and Christian Bale.
Yeah.
That wasn't D&D. Yeah.
No.
But there were several, after the D&D movie came out, there were a bunch of lower budget, smaller films that were fantasy movies that then D&D, they tried to tag a D&D name onto it to try and gather, get people to watch them, and they sucked. They weren't good either. I'd say the closest thing that's been any decent kind of almost D&D adjacent was the things that actually Matt Mercer was involved with called Epica, there's like a series of lower budget fantasy films that were made that Matt Mercer plays the villain in, called Epica. You can see them on
There's also the Mythica movies.
Mythica. That's it.
Yeah,
that.
Mythica.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one.
Mythica.
Yeah.
And but yeah, there's 4 or 5 of them, and I've actually watched a couple of them. They're not bad. They're not. I mean, they are what they are, but they're not super terrible.
They're no dudes and dragons, but you know.
No. But this one is. But this movie, from what I've seen so far, I'm hoping that it's not just all in the trailers. I think it's going to be pretty decent. And and if people suddenly just decide not to go, it's not going to. It's not. The initial interest is going to be from the gamers. Like, gamers are going to go out in masse to see that movie on opening weekend. And if it does well on opening weekend, then the people that don't normally go and see a D&D movie are going to go and see it because they're going to go, oh, it's doing well. Maybe I should go and check this out. You know, people that are just into action movies or just want, hey, let's go and see a cool movie, you know, or whatever. So if it tanks the opening weekend, if it tanks because all of a sudden all the D&D fans are mad, it's going to hurt the movie, the idea of making live action D&D stuff overall. So we need to stop people from saying, fuck Wizards of the Coast, don't go and see their new movie. No, go and see the movie. Go and see the movie, because ultimately if it fails, it's just going to fuck it. It's going to hurt more. It's going to hurt everything. Because it's a thing. It'll hurt all fantasy production. You know, the fact that Lord of the Rings did so well is one of the reasons why we have Game of Thrones. It's one of the reasons why we have the Wheel of Time series and the Rings of Power, and why Critical Role was also so well received, and why the cartoon was so well received, and why the second season starts this week, and the next season starts and the next seasons of that show is in pre-production. If Lord of the Rings had tanked, we wouldn't be having any of this discussion. But it was one of the highest grossing movies and series of all time. And
that made other companies go, there might be a market for fantasy.
Exactly.
Yeah, medieval fantasy stuff.
Because I mean, there were back in the 80s, I think it was the 80s or 90s, late 80s, early 90s. There were several attempts at doing fantasy shows.
Yeah.
And they didn't do well. I loved them. Like Covington Cross, I think was one of them. That one was great. Do you remember
Roar?
Yes. Well,
Roar was what's his fuck?
There was a Celtic tradition one.
It was all at the when the Romans were pulling out of, or still trying to control Ireland.
Yeah.
And what's his name? Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
He was the lead on that show.
Yep. That was one of his very early roles.
It only went for a season, but it was pretty cool.
I loved it.
I loved it. It was really, really pretty cool. He played an Irish prince, the leader of a clan, very powerful Irish clan.
But I felt like in the 80s though, like there was a lot of like fantasy movies did very well though.
Yes.
I would say maybe
not
TV.
Willow, Red Sonja, Excalibur.
Both
Sword
of
and the Sorcerer, Never-Ending Story, Conan.
Krull. Yeah, I would say both the Conan.
Krull.
Beastmaster.
Krull, which was Krull kind of crossed that line between fantasy and sci-fi.
But it was still a big budget fantasy Hollywood movie.
It was.
And of course we can't forget the Barbarians.
The Barbarian Brothers.
Yep.
Yes, the Barbarians.
One of their 2 movies.
Oh. Yeah, the other movie is like the 2 of them were truckers or something like that.
It was kind of like they tried to be nannies. They were trying to break in on that nanny type movie.
There was a slew of low budget barbarian movies that were made in the late 70s and into the like.
But the ones I named weren't low budget. Those were all big Hollywood productions.
Oh, for sure. Like particularly
even the
Conan.
Sword and the Sorcerer.
Yeah. Oh, Sword and Sorcerer for sure. Conan, Dragon Slayer.
Yep.
Dragon Slayer was a big.
Dragon Slayer was 79.
What's that?
Dragon Slayer was 79.
Was it really?
And that was Peter McNichol.
Yep.
So I mean, Lord of the Rings was finally like one of those movies that movie series that finally gave, I'd say, fantasy a proper like budget and a proper high budget kind of thing. Like, I mean, Willow was pretty good size, but Willow was kind of a failure. Willow did not do well at the box office. We may love it in our hearts and minds, and same thing with
Really?
Neverending Story.
Oh,
Neither of those. The Willow was not. It was it was not considered a big success. It was probably made its money back, but didn't.
It eventually became like more of that cult classic.
Yeah.
Like
8.3 million is in its opening weekend in '88, and it made 57.2 million domestically, and it was never released internationally. It was only a domestic release.
Interesting. I bet you it would have done a lot better if it had been internationally released. I bet you it would have.
Which, I mean, figuring for inflation and everything, that's still probably not that great because it didn't even make 100 million.
No.
Yeah, and the budget was 35 million to make it estimated. So, yeah, gross worldwide or gross U.S. and Canada, it made 57 million.
Yeah. And remember, you got to make and back then you needed to make double what you put into the money into the movie to even break even.
Yeah.
Because the promotion, the money for promotions and for all the commercials and everything else is quite often almost the same amount of the cost of the movie.
Yeah.
So yeah. If people don't go and see D&D, it's going to ultimately just hurt.
Yeah.
If they don't go and see Honor Among Thieves, it's going to hurt the fantasy genre and the whole.
Yeah, and one show that I mean, I'm glad it got a second season, but I would have liked to have seen it go even longer. A fantasy show that was on recently in the last few years was Gallivant.
Yeah,
Gallivant was just fucking hilarious. It was one of the funniest shows.
The fact that they got a second season was a goddamn miracle.
Well, and I love the title. Surprised. I love the title of the first episode of the second season. Yeah. Suck it, Cancellation Bear.
Yeah.
It's the title of the first episode of the second season.
And the whole first song is like, we didn't expect to get this.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh.
Because that's the thing.
Like
it was
6 minutes talking or singing about how they didn't expect to get a second season, but they're really excited that they did.
Yeah, that show was great because it was a musical, but it
was a musical show on top of it.
Yeah, it was a musical comedy, and it was one of the funniest shows on television at that time.
Yeah, and then they also like commented of like, yeah, sorry that our main song was such an earworm. Imagine it for us.
But yeah, I mean,
that show was awesome.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it had some names too. I mean, like Timothy Olmanson was in it.
Yeah.
Who else was in there? Because I thought there were some others that were maybe not.
He was one of those actors that people appreciated because he's very recognizable.
Yes.
But the one British actor who was wasn't he a rugby player or something?
Or Vinnie Jones.
Vinnie Jones, he was on it. The one kid who played like Gallivant's sidekick.
Sid, Luke Youngblood.
Yeah, he was actually a Harry Potter alumnus.
Oh, that's right, he was. Now the one thing about Timothy Olmanson is that I believe it was him that
was King Richard, right?
What's that? King Richard,
That's
yes.
King Richard.
Yeah. Let me just double check something on him, but I believe
he plays God on Lucifer.
That's true. He did play God on Lucifer.
Or God.
Yeah.
In an episode.
Yep. He's Cain in Supernatural. He was on Warehouse 13.
Plays a voice in Old Republic.
Yeah. He does a voice in he does a bunch of voices. Not him? Maybe it wasn't him. Yeah, I'm too far back. So it's not him that I was thinking of. Never mind. Forget I said anything. Human Target. That was a great show too, but that not a fantasy show. But yeah, just looking at everything he's been in tons of stuff. Yeah, he's Earl Johnson in Lucifer. God.
So the thing is too with the fantasy genre, you had Merlin.
Oh,
Merlin was one.
Yeah, Merlin was one.
That ran for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I didn't realize he's the voice of Jorgen, Eric Jorgen, one of the trooper companions.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I know that voice.
But yeah, the thing about the fantasy genre is if you don't have a decent sized budget for the special effects and for costuming and for sets and stuff like that, it reads as cheesy as hell. You know, there's a reason why Game of Thrones was so well received, is because one, it had very mature content, particularly in the first like 2 seasons.
It had HBO money.
Right, exactly. It had high budget. It had both, and the newer ones too, House of the Dragon. It had a high budget for costuming, for sets, for the special effects, for the dragons. The dragons looked amazing. It was well received because people looked at it and went, "Wow, that looks great." If it looks cheesy as fuck, people aren't going to. They're not. It could be one of the best written shows and well acted and whatever, but if it looks cheesy as hell, people aren't going to buy it. They're not going to get into it. They can't get around that, you know. So that's why, you know, these shows need to continue, and they're expensive shows. So we need the audience to back that you know, the price, the cost. You know, a friend of mine watched to the end of Willow, and was like, had said that, and his response was, it started good, it ended good, but the middle was a mess, and that they probably could have turned the whole series into like a 2-hour movie, and just had a better time.
Yeah, I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble with Willow because I don't like, what I really don't like is the soundtrack. I think them trying to put modern songs and modern sounding music into a fantasy setting doesn't work. Not the way they're doing it. It clashes with what they're showing on the screen.
I had a similar kind of complaint about the more modern language too. Like the dialogue is much more modern.
Yes.
Kind
of. So that would be like, have any of you seen the newest Robin Hood take, where it's the whole thing is set up like they're storming, you know, the doing the Crusades, but it's all like it was Afghanistan.
Oh.
They're in small squads and running around, and it just was like, this isn't medieval combat. This is, if you took some of the troops that went to Afghanistan and gave them bows. It just didn't seem like fantasy at all.
Just the movie with Jamie Foxx as Little John.
Yes.
Okay. I actually haven't seen it yet. It actually did not do well in the box office.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I picked it up on sale on Blu-ray, and I still haven't watched it, and because I like Robin Hood movies.
I do too. But I went to watch that one. I was, the first 10 minutes, I was like, "What is this? This is
unlike other Robin Hoods. I can speak with a British accent."
Yes. One of the best Robin Hood movies.
Oh, and to go back a couple of minutes to the cheesy as fuck fantasy movies, Masters of the Universe.
Oh god. Well, that one came into modern times though. That kind of crossed the line. It was
well, that's the thing about He-Man. He-Man has always been a kind of a combination of fantasy and science fiction.
Yeah.
Really are. But it's I put it in there. I put it in that on that.
Well, I mean, it's category. Like one of my favorite comics was always Arion, Lord of Atlantis from DC. Yeah. It was only ran for 3 years, but I really liked it, and I love the combination of magic and technology that they put in there for Atlantis.
Atlantis is was a bastion of science and technology. So,
which it was interesting to see them bring him into Young Justice.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I was like, ooh, because he's
really
one of my first D&D characters, and the one that I played the longest was actually named Arion, and it was after that comic book character because I loved that comic so much. It's one of the first comics I ever started reading as a kid.
Yep, good stuff. Well, Chris, we've been at this a while. What do you think? Shall we start wrapping things up?
Yeah, we can start wrapping things up. So I'm saying jury's still out on D&D and the OGL. They stepped things back and tried to calm things down. We'll see what I'm now in a wait and see again. I don't think it's gonna be anytime soon. They said that they need time before they put something out. And basically, I think they're trying to figure out how can we structure this so that we can get it by these fools. I mean, fans, and because I still think with Hasbro in there, especially they are a major corporation that doesn't give two fucks about us. All they care about is that we keep spending money. They don't care about the product. They don't care about the lore. They don't care about any of that, the history. They care about making money, and that's it. That is the bottom line. And that's why I think they finally came out with a statement, and why they've walked things back is because people hit them in the pocketbook by canceling their D&D Beyond subscription.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason we've even heard anything to this point. Otherwise, they were just going to ignore it and try and let it go away.
Yep, I think they were. And because
the internet has the memory of a goldfish.
Yep. And they're just, corporate scumbags, that are just like, we're going to make as much money as possible on the backs of these people. So my hot take is I'm not going to abandon a game that I've loved my whole life, but I'm going to be a lot more wary and a lot more careful as to what exactly I spend my money on going forward on these books. I traditionally didn't actually buy a lot of D&D stuff because most of my friends already had it, and I couldn't, for the longest time, really couldn't afford to buy every book. Now I'm a grown up, and now I've been buying 5th edition, but I have more 5th edition books than I've ever had of any other D&D system. So actually I have more Pathfinder books than I have comparatively. But
I went looking for Pathfinder books and realized how many fucking books they have out. I'm like, God damn, this is like 2nd edition D&D. They got so many fucking books.
Yeah. The nice thing is, though, Pathfinder was the first system to start putting out paperback versions of their books too. So you can buy, they're called their pocket editions. Originally they'd put out the hardcover, and then like 6 months or a year later they'd put out the paperback. Now they're basically putting them out at the same time. The paperbacks are about half the price. They're at like $20 to $25, and they're solid. They're great. I've been buying those instead because they're smaller and they're a little more condensed, but they're pretty great. Like I said, my call is I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna let them course correct. I'm gonna see what they do to try and apologize to us for this gross injustice.
What about you, Bob? You're another experienced gamer.
Well, nothing says I'm sorry like, some free books, but we know that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm pretty much on the wait and see bandwagon because honestly, this 5th edition, especially on D&D Beyond, was the first money I've spent on any D&D books for a while. I didn't buy anything for 3.5 because other people had it, or I could get the PDFs from various sources online.
Arr.
Nope. It actually wasn't even an R. It was just a place that was in a country that didn't, you didn't have to follow those kind of rules.
All right. So I'm also interested in hearing what the newer players think about this. So Pete and Renee, what were your thoughts on the OGL just before we get out of here?
Well, at first, I didn't really understand what it actually meant in the very beginning. In fact, in the last game that we played, I was even asking you, like, before we actually started playing, like, what is going on? Like, all of a sudden, like, within, like, the last day or so in our last game, I was like, I'm seeing, like, everything explode online. What is it all about? And you gave me a little bit of perspective on it. And then I started looking it up online. And then that's where it was like, yeah, it's impacting the type of content that we honestly just played. Like I said, like that's why I called it out, like the Tasha's Kiss.
Yeah.
And like, and that's kind of like what it reminded me of, like when I said like PlayStation versus Xbox. That back in 2014, Xbox and Microsoft tried doing something that was experimental, that was going to like confine the players. It was unpopular, and it took another company, their competitor, to essentially do the exact opposite, come out formally and say that, and make a huge like win for themselves, that it was actually impacting like how things are going to be moving forward for that, for Xbox at the time. And that's reminding me a lot of what's happening now between like Pathfinder and D&D. I don't think that D&D is going to go away, or like that there's going to be any problems, but it really made an impact to them of what the players actually are capable of, and their voice as a whole, to be able to change their corporate strategy. I'm glad that it actually came out that way. Although, still being new, I didn't really understand what it actually meant at first, compared to how you guys were reacting to it, and the internet, those that have been playing for it for, 20, 30 plus years, what that actually meant as well. That's my perspective from it.
Okay, what about you, Renee?
Think I'm also pretty much in the same boat. I did not delve super deep into this because frankly I just had too much other shit that is on my plate. But I think it's funny that corporate greed tried to prevail, and they tried to pull a fast one. The thing is that their fan base is very smart. I mean, the fan base like literally got the company through the dull times of like the 90s into the early 2000s. It's like, no, like I don't ever like really recall D&D being at all popular. It was still like a nerd thing before being a nerd was cool.
That it was a big thing for nerds in the 80s, and it kind of did have a dip in the 90s.
Yeah.
Which is why I wasn't big into it, because I didn't start becoming like, I was only about 6-7 years old by the time the 90s started. So, and I think that's probably where D&D was kind of going a little bit down and a little bit more obscure, because more video games were the big thing, or like things like Pokemon card games. I heard of Magic.
Yeah, different realms of nerd were taking hold.
Yes,
but
I didn't hear of D&D much.
It's the fact that they tried to pull a fast one on very loyal, dedicated fans who are also nerds. Nerds tend to be very smart. Like they run companies now. Like
now something like this probably would have worked back in the 90s. Like, and no one would have probably noticed.
Well,
but with the internet and with the popularity that you have today, there's no way.
There may have been an outcry, but it wouldn't been as public, like you said, because of all the social media.
Social media.
People would have been offended, but it still would have gone through because there would have been no giant, way to hurt them.
Right.
And nerds banded together, and they hit corporations where it hurts most. Money talks, even the absence of it.
And it was immediate absence of it, not just we won't buy any more books in the future.
Right. Well, because that's the thing. I mean, D&D Beyond is a constant revenue stream.
Every
day.
Had this happened in the 90s?
No.
90s or 2000s, before like social media and frankly every household having the internet, it The D&D it would never have gotten to the point where it's currently at.
Nope.
It would have died in the water and would have died in the nights.
Now, like you said, their fans are smart. They're also passionate.
Yeah, and very loyal. They look at all the free content and community built content that's out there.
Yep.
Like to the point where a whole nother company sprung up and multiple other companies.
Yeah, multiple other companies.
Or even just on D&D Beyond itself, all the homebrew stuff that people have put in.
Yep.
And that you can
without asking
yourself.
for a dime or anything. Yeah. It's just like, here, I made this.
Yeah,
Look,
it's
everybody.
this really cool thing I created. I want other people to enjoy it.
Yeah. And a lot of them too, I'm sure, go, hey, give me feedback. If there's something you don't like, let me know. You know, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't piss off nerds.
Mm-hmm.
Especially nerds with adult money.
And I think that's
that's the other thing. Like
yeah.
all of those kids that used to play are all now adults and have adult money.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to end the show too. Don't piss off the nerds, because the nerds have inherited the world. It's cool to be a nerd now. It's
the geek shall inherit the earth.
Yep. So I think that's a great theme for tonight and going forward. Don't piss off the nerds.
Agreed.
So join Russ and I tomorrow night, 8:00, right here on Twitch, and then join all of us on Friday for Tavern Knights. It's going to be a blast.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to have a great time. I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys move on through this. I know for some, the puzzle of getting into the dungeon was frustrating, and I heard some complaints that a certain somebody hates puzzles. So I'll make sure I put a lot more in.
Wait, what? Did I miss something?
Russ was getting a little frustrated just before we took the break in the last game, and we were like, usually the DM gives us a clue.
Gives us a little clue or something at some point.
This much struggle, and then during the break, that's where Chris made me roll, and I'm guessing that he was very generous in like what the save was going to be, and then I recalled a comment in a dream, and then I feverishly looking through my notes that I took about probably like 6 months ago, and I happened to come across a particular like quote that I wrote down. And I'm so glad that I wrote it down.
What's super funny is the fact that after the daylight spell not working, I'm like, oh well, fuck it, let's try the opposite. And for whatever reason, I talked myself out of it in my own head. So we went easily 10 minutes longer than what we needed to. Because before the break, 10 minutes prior, I was going to be like, fuck it, let's try the opposite, darkness. And I just never did. Because someone said something that we were still going down the light track of like, maybe it has to be actual sunlight.
Well,
so
we
ended up doing that.
We were also trying to take away the stone and stone shape and so many different things.
I even smeared my own blood on it.
Yeah.
I don't mind puzzles. I just I at that point I was just getting really fucking frustrated, and I was like, can we get into the goddamn dungeon?
Well, that's the thing. I had given Pete the clue long before, and I was hoping that would have stuck out, specifically for that this has something to do with the map that he has. So
so it's I was going back, and when I was going back, I was looking at what
taking a month off does to you.
Yep.
And I was looking at different parts of my notes. I was looking at when we were doing research and things like that. I wasn't thinking of like that one particular dream that we had when we were in Phandalin, that where I got a particular clue that was kind of obscure. I was just looking in the wrong part of my notes, and I wasn't anticipating that. So when you mentioned the dream, it's like, okay, I only had like 2 significant dreams. I immediately went through. All right, this one doesn't seem to it. Oh, the second one though does have something, and I'm glad that you were able to give us that. But
so what do we get from that? You should always listen to your mother.
Okay, that's an even better one to leave the
listen
the
to your
show on
mother.
Listen to your mother.
Yep. So, all right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks a lot to all you for joining me and talking D&D. We jumped up on our soapbox a little bit tonight, but it was needed. So
Hey, that's what these shows are for.
That's
guys. But chime in on the Facebook page or the Instagram or the tweets or Twitter or whatever.
Subscribe and join our Discord channel.
Exactly.
We have a Discord channel just for our subscribers. By the way, I put something up there earlier because I'm like, I want these. It's Lego figures.
Where are we going to put them?
It's Lego figures. They're only this big. They're little.
Oh,
they're
okay.
Lego figs.
Minifigs, yeah.
Yeah. They're
the
Lego figs of the original D&D cartoon.
No
characters.
Shit. That's
Oh, very nice.
Well, Lego has released some preliminary images for some D&D Lego sets.
Well, on Amazon, you can actually get action figures of 3 of the original D&D cast or D&D cartoon. You can get Hank, Diana, and Bobby with Uni. Bobby with Uni is like $50.
Sure.
The other 2 are like 25 each. But and now they're also starting to come out with they've already got out figs for Honor Among Thieves as well.
Of course they do.
And they're $25 a piece for the action figures.
Jesus. All right.
Yep. So, all right. Well, like I said, Russ and I will be back tomorrow, and then all of us will be back on Friday. So, until then, have a good night, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. Let us know what you think. Talk to us.
Have a good night.
See ya.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.